So I first encountered Rabbi Kushner when I was a student at Brandeis University. There was a conference for religious school teachers, and he was, many of you know, a rabbi in the Boston area, and he was brought in to teach teachers in Sunday schools how to teach better. The sanctuary was packed, wall to wall, standing room only, as was the draw for him. I was at another conference where he was at, same thing, again, wall to wall. And then I heard from a friend that he spoke in Chicago. Unfortunately, I was trying very best to get there, couldn't make it. A friend of mine did, and they had like 50 people in their sanctuary expecting 200. And his response to each and every one of those encounters was pretty much one and the same. I came here, and those who need to be here are here, and we will learn together. One of the things that I found profound about him was, for somebody who was nationally and internationally known, a phenomenal writer, a gifted speaker, an orator, and an amazing teacher, he never let it get to his head. You would expect somebody like that, and believe me, I know many rabbis for whom they walk into the room and there's the ego in the room, and there they are too. And you can't really breathe because the ego takes up so much space. I don't know if that's ever been your experience before. Was not the case with Rabbi Kushner. Whenever you met him, you met somebody for whom he was authentically who he was. And what an amazing gift that was. In and of itself, a profound lesson. How many of us can say that is true? One of the readings that we read tonight was about how we have sometimes two different journeys that our souls go on. The journey of seeking fame and fortune and leaving a mark. And then the journey of recognizing that we need to be a good person internally. That what matters the most in life are those positive relationships with one another. That by living out our highest self, we're being our truest self. And many of you may be aware that what made Rabbi Kushner famous, though, was something that was extremely tragic. His son Aaron was sweet and bright and loving, and unfortunately passed away from a genetic disorder. And yet, it wasn't as if that pain ever left him, I don't think, though I don't know for sure, but I would assume, based on his writings and hearing him speak. But it also never got to the point that it made him so weighed down by it that he saw himself as a victim of it. He went on to write a book that I think most likely was a cathartic moment for him, one entitled When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And yet that book, that title, went on to be translated many times over and read by millions and millions of people. Of course, the book garnered criticism. He articulated and described a God that at times was withdrawn so as to not be present for tragedy. And I think he wrote that not all of the corners of the universe did God's presence meet at all times. He also described nature as morally neutral, and that sometimes we lived suffering in this life because we also had the gift of freedom of choice. And of course, sometimes that choice gets in the way of what may be beneficial for all. And for some people, that was in fact challenging. Why? They believe in an omnipotent and omniscient God who's ever present. Okay? And for Kushner, he was deeply struggled by making meaning of suffering. And I think that, for me, is yet another one of the lessons. Of course, the first being yourself, the second being that there is a lesson in suffering. For him, he went to God and he tried and struggled to develop a language around that suffering that made sense, that he felt like God wasn't there, and yet God was there at the same time. For others, I think that theology is challenging. But I don't think that just because it's a challenging theology, it's something that we should not look at or learn from. One of the things, again, that I find deeply comforting is that, and again, I shared this in one of the readings, is that for Rabbi Harold Kushner to live lives that have purpose and are not simply centered on ourselves, what a challenge that can be. He writes and puts it this way in one of his books: is there a question to the question of why bad things happen to good people? The answer is to forgive the world for not being perfect, and to forgive God for not being perfect, and to reach out to the people around us who are not perfect, and to go on living in spite of the fact that we are not perfect, and to respond to what has happened to others with the care and the compassion they so much need from us. The happiest of people I know are the people who don't even think about being happy. They just think about being good neighbors, good people. And while they are busy being good, happiness kind of sneaks in through the back door and enriches their lives while they are not looking. What an idea. Focus on being good. Not focus on striving to be happy, not focus on striving to forget that we're bored and not wanting to flip through TikTok or fill our lives with other things, of struggling to find something that we're striving for, but focus on being good. One of the last things that Rabbi Kushner wrote was a new Torah commentary for the conservative movement. That was the movement, by the way. He was a conservative rabbi, not a reform rabbi. We'll forgive him for that one. But it was a new Torah commentary. Initially, the conservative movement wrote this commentary, and I know this may be shocking. It was perceived as dry and bland and a little too esoteric. I don't know if you've ever met any rabbis who are esoteric writers or thinkers, myself not included. He was brought in to add a little spice into this book. He had a time convincing other writers to join him because, of course, they complained. What are we gonna, by doing this project with you, we're not gonna have the time to write our own books or do other projects. And he pretty much looked at them and said, so? Turns out sometimes struggling with text and turning that text into a gift that others can read and learn from is more important than the ego. This new Torah commentary can be found in many conservative synagogues. I'm not sure of all yet. And I want to close with a midrash. A midrash that says that when it came time for Moses to die, God said to the angel of death, stand aside and let me take the soul of Moses and not you. So the angel of death stood aside, and God came down from the heaven to take the soul of Moses. The Torah said that Moses died al pi Hashem. Al pi Hashem, which can be understood in two different ways. One, it can mean that Moses died at the command of God. Or it can mean, therefore, that Moses lived his life in commands of God and Moses died at the command of God. Or it can mean that he died at the mouth of God. That is, an expression that we kind of see today, panim al panim, face to face, meaning that he died looking at God in the face. He died with gentleness in a beautiful way, surrounded by God's grace and love, with the kiss of God. But the Midrash says that the soul of Moses said to God, I don't want to leave this body, for this is the holiest and purest place I've ever been. And so what did God do? God persuaded the soul of Moses to leave his body and go up to heaven with him by saying 6 gentle words. Higada harbi, amalta harbi, bo lanachnu, bo lanuach. You have worked hard, you have achieved much, come and rest. This Midrash, by the way, was in the eulogy that Jack Reamer wrote in response to Rabbi Kushner. That's where these last words are Jack Reimer's, by the way. He wrote them thinking that what a gift it was that Rabbi Kushner had lived in this world, that he has in fact worked hard, that he has in fact achieved much, and now it is the time for him to go and rest. May we all be inspired by Rabbi Kushner. May we choose to live lives of upstandingness, of goodness in our hearts, striving not for our ego, but for the benefit of others, so that when we look back, we don't see the littered hot remains of things that we were focused on, rather the loving web of relationships that will always be around us, surrounding them and us with love. Shabbat Shalom.